Emotional resilience, and I am delighted to have you all here. I'll just give you some time to kind of flow in. As always, we love to make it really interactive, so please do use the chat function. You can see it there. We've started it, myself and Kieran. Let us know how you are, where you are, what your expectations are for this evening. What are you thinking? Are you hoping? We're just delighted to really have you here, and we've been busy drumming up as many men as we can to come along, and we've done really well. So you could start, if you like, by going into the polls. If you look at the bottom there, you'll see there are some really good questions in the polls that I think will help me, will help my amazing guest this evening, Conor Creighton. And really, it's like just giving us, the more that we get from you, the more we're able to help you, which is essentially the purpose of this evening, is to help as much as we possibly can. So just going through those questions, you'll see that we've kind of divided them into if you are a man or if you are a woman. And the reason for that is just that we're really trying to get at the sort of impact, let's say, of men's mental health, obviously on men first and foremost, but then of course for women in terms of the men in your life, whether it's your partner, your father, your son, your brother, your friends, whoever it might be in your life, and just what it's like to have different issues arising for men in your life. So take a moment, read those, and please do answer them. I will be reading them later. So the more that, again, as always, the more that you interact, the better. There is my beautiful, hello Leona, how are you? And my lovely sister. I was just talking about you, Orla, to Conor, who lived in Berlin for 10 years, I think. So yes, you are welcome. And I was just saying how amazing your German is and how proud I am of you. Honestly, Pat, it's amazing. So we're going to kick off officially. It is 1930. So welcome officially again to the 11th in the series of Building Emotional Resilience. Tonight is really very special, and to be honest with you, we've had to work harder than ever to drum up as many registrants as we can, as many of you to come along. We've done really well. Usually we have circa 400 to 500 people on these webcasts. This evening we had over 200, I think, who registered, and of those we have over 60, I think it's 65 men or so. So this is something that is really important, and we really want to make the most of it for you. So as always, if you're a regular here, you will know that basically what I love to do is always start off with a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of centering, and I really want to bring your full focus for the next 60 minutes, because we live in a busy world. You've probably had a busy day, and it's very easy to get distracted, but this time is your time. So let's really make the most of it by clearing the decks and by bringing the focus in. So if you're new to this, bear with me and really just sort of examine how you feel before and after just 3 deep breaths. That's all we're going to do. 3 simple deep breaths. So if you could just take your 2 hands to your belly, and we're going to breathe in as deep as we can to the belly, because that will center us most. So if you're comfortable, just slowly close down your eyes. Take a full breath into the belly, and then a slow, long exhale, and exhale out through the mouth like you're letting go. Let's do that again for 2. Deep breath into the belly, and then a long exhale through the mouth. Third, deep breath. Make it the deepest of the day as you breathe in. And then a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Letting it all go. When you're ready, just open up the eyes again. So what's really amazing is that's just 3 breaths, right? But it does bring what we need, and that's the focus. I want you to do one thing at one time. And I think that this evening's topic, men's mental health, we really want to look at moving from suppression to expression. And this is a landscape that is changing, thankfully, but it's slow. And in my opinion, it's just too slow. Um, the term, for example, man up, is something that is so toxic and has caused untold misery for so many men, for so many generations. And this is a conversation that requires so much more attention, which is why I'm so delighted to be having it here this evening. The latest data that we have on death by suicide from the Central Statistics Office was in 2019. And out of that, there were 524 deaths from suicide in Ireland. And of those deaths, 408 were male. So just stay with that for a moment because I think that's very, very significant. 524 and 408 were male. It's really interesting just how stark that difference is. And if you look at this globally, what we have is the rate of suicide mortality in 2019 was 9 in every 100,000, okay, for both sexes. And out of that 9%, let's say 12.6% were male and 5.4 were female. So again, that is a huge difference. So I generally don't like to generalize. I really don't. I find it hard to say things like men, women, teenagers, because we get into a place where we're starting to categorize, to label. And it's something that I find really isn't that helpful. But for the purpose of this evening, please bear with us when we talk about men's mental health, because, that is essentially what we're here to talk about. But it doesn't mean to say, in terms of generalizing that all men have problems expressing themselves or that all men have anger issues or anything like that. But I think that's just, something I really wanted to call early on. So basically, just to before I bring Conor on to take over really, and I'm going to be doing most of the listening at that point. But before I do, I just want to say something about why this is such a sort of important matter close to my own heart. And really, it comes from being a mother of a son. And to be honest with you, before I had a son, I don't think I really understood men. I had a father, I had, friends, I had boyfriends that was married, so I had men in my life. I never had a brother, but I certainly would have had, obviously, men in my life. I think that once I became a mother, I started to see really what it was like to be a boy in a way that I don't think I could ever have experienced. And that term man up, I think it's actually much more sort of actually accurate to say boy up, because it seems to happen very, very early in life where boys from 6 or 7 years of age are really started to be conditioned to suppress and push down their emotion. So, for example, if a girl is in the playground at 6 or 7 years of age and she falls and she hurts herself and she cries, well, that's all okay. That's perfectly acceptable. If a boy does the same thing, it's a different story. It seems to be that you have to push it down, the emotion isn't there. And it just happens so early. And that's what I saw. And, I was quite surprised, I have to say, but it's opened up my eyes in a way that, really has helped me to understand men better. It's helped me do my job better. And I love to work with male clients because I find that, it takes such confidence and courage for them to come forward and to talk. And when they do, it's magic in terms of what the transformation that can happen. So, from a therapeutic point of view. So, just on the housekeeping, before I bring Conor on, I promise it's not all about me. Can you imagine? It's all about men's mental health, and Conor doesn't get a word in. It's like, are you serious, Fiona? Yes, just please do keep the chats coming in. And I will read comments at certain stages, but I'm not going to sort of distract myself from them because I really want to give Conor all of our full attention. Please do answer the polls. And without further ado, I'm just going to bring Conor on now to the stage. So, Conor, thank you for being here. You're welcome.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Kieran, and thanks for the lovely introduction as well.
Yes, yes. Well, actually, I haven't done that properly, so thanks for reminding me, Connor. The first question I actually have for you really is like, if you want to just tell people a little bit about you if they don't know your work,
Mhm.
and also, in particular, what is it about men's mental health that you were particularly interested in? What was that for you?
Yeah, well, I'm a meditation teacher. That's basically what I do, and I write books. And I just came out of a retreat this morning, so I haven't been using my voice that much all week. So if I seem a little sluggish, it's because I've been in deep silence for most of the week. Um,
Wow.
and
You're probably floating on a cloud, are you, Connor? You're
Yeah, a
very
little bit. I hope you can kind of keep me tethered to drift off here. But I think my interest in men's work was basically my own development. Like all the work that I do, everything I teach is what I'm trying to learn myself. You know what I mean? Like meditation is sort of comes to is quite difficult for me, but by teaching it, it's a great way for me to remain accountable. The same way with men's work. I don't think I know that I haven't had a great connection towards my own authentic masculine expression. So by doing men's work and by leading groups of men and by coming involved in this and creating courses, it's a great way for me to learn and sort of just teach while learning. I think that's what a huge amount of us do anyway, especially the field of men's work because it's quite it's very ancient, but it's also quite new.
okay. What do you mean by that in terms of it's very ancient, like
So
in terms?
yeah, so in terms of like kind of the support that men would have had, say, hundreds or thousands of years ago, would have been a tribal support. We would have
Mhm,
come together with other men. There were elders. There was accountability. We had a sort of a village mentality where men didn't get lost. Men didn't slip through the cracks.
mhm,
We were taken care of. We were brought through initiations. We were taught this is how you act. You know, men were kind of given opportunity to cry together, to emote together. This was very much the tribal experience for many of us men, like hundreds and thousands of years ago. In modern society, men don't have that
mhm.
anymore. What we have a very kind of pared down, limited version of that, where our full expression of emotion is no longer allowed. And so that's really what kind of brought me to men's work was what it was having a partner and every full moon her and her girlfriends would all get together and they would they would talk about their body parts, they would talk about like their kind of their menstrual cycles, they would talk about everything, and she would come home and would tell me all about the evening they had, and I would think, wow, I have a football team and all we do is we sort of slag each other in the changing rooms. Do you know what I mean? It really kind of bringing a big emotional issue to the changing room just wasn't allowed, and I wanted that. I really wanted that. I was hungry to have real connection with other men where I could really share my feelings with them. And that's what brought me to starting men's circles.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you're alone there, Connor, are you? I mean, maybe it's just that because of the field that you're in, you're more aware of it, let's say. But I mean, I'm sure most or a lot of men would feel the same, but maybe just not be able to express it in the same way. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also fair to say that most men who are kind of caught up in this, it's what I would call like patriarchal masculinity. Do you know what I
Mhm,
mean? It's the sort of the masculinity that most of us grow up in. It requires a man to be somewhat depressed all the time in order to function in that kind of role.
mhm,
Because the depression is necessary because you have to shut down so much of yourself in order
mhm.
to function as a man in this system of patriarchal masculinity. You have to kind of split from so many of your emotions. So I think a problem with an awful lot of men is that we all have this low level depression that's going on in the background. And it just feels like, oh, this is life. This is how it is.
It feels so normal because it is. Do you think it is coming back to what I was saying earlier, like that boy up, that it's happened so young for in the life of a man or a
Yeah,
boy
Fiona,
in that case?
if you think about it, like if you think the kind of the education of young boys is basically ritual humiliation. That's how we are educated. A young boy does something, like cries because a toy breaks. And then he's humiliated by peers or family members or whoever, or the older boys around. And he learns in this moment, okay, my full range of emotions aren't safe. So I will shut this down. If I
Mm.
act a certain way, the world isn't safe for me anymore. So it's this kind of this is it's sort of how we most young boys are kind of and I mean girls are kind of conditioned in their own way, but all I can speak to is how boys are conditioned, is that
Yeah.
we're policed by other boys, we're policed by our parents, and this kind
Mm.
of it pushes us into a space where we recognize, there's a limited range of emotions that are safe for me to express. And
Are
then
acceptable in that sense, that will be allowed or will be sort of permitted almost by society.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, to me, it seems like it's almost if you compare it to a language, and you look at the emotion as if emotions are a language and how we speak them, it's like, when you look at the tenderness of a young boy, a toddler, and
Mm,
how he has his full, and that's why I was saying earlier, just being a mother, I've been able to see that, the full range of emotion, that is accessible to either
yeah.
gender, and then how that language, it's almost like you stop getting taught it. It's almost like, okay, you've got that far and now that's where it ends, and now you've got to start, rather than learning more, you're actually sort of pulling back, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And it's kind of it's even crueler than that. It's kind of robbed from us. At this young age, it's like that's no longer acceptable.
Wow, yeah, yeah. So hard, so hard. And
Yeah.
that low level of depression, I mean, that, that's something that makes a lot of sense, in terms of seeing how, anger can manifest, for example, within men, defensiveness, etc.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say about that? What how
Well,
does that come out?
the interesting thing about anger is that's kind of an encouraged emotion in young boys. To be aggressive is something that is kind of really encouraged, especially when we're in school. To be kind of competitive. It's like, oh, this kid's got drive. Same way when it comes to sports, we're encouraged to be aggressive. But then
Mm,
there's some boys who kind of take that too far and then they get totally ostracized. So it's one of the reasons that men go to anger so often is
mm,
because we're typically we grow up been encouraged to go to anger
mhm,
more than other emotions, so we can do it. I think the other more interesting thing is that when a lot of the time when you can't access sadness, which is sort of connected to the low level of low-lying depression in all men who grow up in these systems, when you
mm,
can't access sadness, the kind of the secondary emotion from sadness is anger. So you just go there instead. One of the reasons men lose their temper an awful lot is
mm,
because they can't connect with the real sadness beneath it. And the
mhm.
reason they can't connect is because they've numbed their entire bodies as a way of coping.
Yeah,
Like I know,
absolutely.
I noticed that with myself. Like it's difficult for me to cry,
Yeah.
and I know that it's difficult for me to cry
Mm,
because I'm out of practice. I've numbed so much of my feeling body, and so
mm.
it requires like something huge to bring the tears out.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That really makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's rare to see, I don't know if I ever saw my father cry, and
Yeah,
not that he was completely blocked or repressed or anything, but it just wasn't something that, I think you're right. I think it just doesn't come easily because it's been bypassed, if you like. As you say, the sadness is bypassed straight to anger.
yeah.
Um, and would you say then alcohol plays a part there as well in terms of how, you know, uh, emotion comes out quite often, both for, men and women, but in particular, would you say that men maybe sort of use alcohol as a way to anesthetize themselves, but then also the emotion, it's easier to access the emotion without when the inhibition is dimmed down.
Yeah, totally. I'm not sure that would be the real intention, is like, oh, I'm going to drink so I can emote. But I'd imagine it's initially just the anesthetic quality of alcohol and the pain numbing
Yeah,
quality of it is what would draw like a lot of men towards alcohol or other any other forms of addiction. It could just be your phone. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Anything that distracts you. Uh,
yeah.
that's it.
Okay, yeah, yeah. But I suppose, would you say it's possible subconsciously that that is, a way of accessing emotion? As you say, it's not something that they might, say, okay, I'm going to drink so I can feel emotion, but it does tend to happen more, doesn't it? That they, have easier access to it. What would you say
Yeah,
there?
yeah,
Am I?
totally. I just want to
Yeah,
apologize if you can hear a lot of chihuahuas barking. My neighbor has like 5 dogs.
I can't
They're
hear
all
any
barking
of
at the
them.
moment. I don't know if you can hear it coming through.
I
But
can't hear them. No.
okay, good, good, good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I know for myself, I can only talk from my own experience of this, but I think before I had, say, the confidence to really bring an emotional issue to a male friend, a way that I would kind of try and get in the back door would be going for a few pints.
Hmm.
And then the courage would sort of grow, and then you'd know, like, oh, maybe I'll be received here if I express something like this.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. It's a kind of almost like a doorway in some sense. It kind of it
Yeah.
makes it again maybe more acceptable in some sense.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in many ways, the thing that kind of got me into men's work initially was my best friend committed suicide when we were both 19.
my
And
goodness,
we had a conversation about it.
I
He
didn't know that,
talks
Connor.
about
Yeah.
suicide in a pub. Like, I remember like a couple of nights before he did it, we were sat in a pub and we were talking about our mental health. Although this was in the late 90s. I don't think anyone ever mentioned mental health then.
Mm.
Um, but we had a few pints and we could talk about these things, and it was the closest we'd ever come to like a heart to heart, even though we were best friends. We just didn't have that language. And Kevin was his name, and he's somebody I always think about when I'm doing this work or when I'm bringing men together in circles, like just how
Hmm.
beautiful it would have been for him if something like this existed back then.
Absolutely, that really brings it home. And those statistics, it's easy to read out statistics, but like, when you're talking about one of your friends,
Yeah.
it just brings it home in such a different way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So absolutely. And that's why, again, I think this kind of work is so important, to help, he was 19, Kevin, when
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, very sad. But I can see why then how important it is for you now to really do all you can. So fair play
Mm.
to you, Connor. It's such important work.
Yeah.
Um, just to dig a little bit deeper, like what do you think it is? Like I know we've kind of spoken about it, but if you were to say, you know, specifically even two or three things that block men from opening their hearts, that block them from having those conversations, what are those things?
So, in order to open your heart, you need to be able to trust, right? I think that's a basic sort of equation around that. And many men will have had the experience of opening their hearts as kids, and then opening their hearts simply in a way of been maybe like overly emotional as a child, maybe being overly expressive, and then been told that man doesn't act that way. And so
Yeah.
they shut down, they totally shut down. Um, and so like, and it takes such a lot, it takes so much effort to open your heart again when you've been kind of humiliated or shamed like that. The other thing too is that so many of us men, we bully each other. You know what I mean? We grow up like boys. We harass each other.
Mm,
And the way that we do it is so intelligent that we pick out any attempt to be a little bit different,
mm,
and then we focus in on that. You know what I mean? I know myself from my own school experience, like we were so clever at finding the one thing that you were most scared about. And then that's what we would slag you about constantly. And we all did it to each other. And so if you think about it, like if this is sort of the ground that we're growing in, this is where we're learning vulnerability. We I think young boys and then men, we just learned that like vulnerability is just way too dangerous. There's no safe places for vulnerability, and especially amongst other men.
Yeah, absolutely. My God, it's like another huge window into the, like, I'm just, I'm just learning so much from that. The way you describe it, Connor, is really emotive. But
Yeah,
like, pardon the pun, but it is because it just
yeah,
shows you how, you know, how toxic it truly is, that, and that trust, as you
mm,
say, like if trust is broken, early on, then that's where it's so hard to actually move forward, isn't it? Because
yeah.
in any relationship, when trust is damaged, then we're in trouble. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
And then Fiona, do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
it's sort of when you imagine the generational weight of this, you then have
yeah.
fathers who don't know how to hug their sons. Do you
Hmm.
know what I mean? Or grandfathers who never told their fathers that they loved them. You know what I mean? And this has been kind of going on and on and on. I remember when I think I was in my early 20s and I lived in Italy. And I moved over there for a while. And I was just amazed that, I had friends and their fathers would come in and like kiss them all over the face. And
Yes,
I
yeah,
remember thinking, this is really creepy. Like that's how distant I had distant my experience of a father's
yes.
love was.
So it made
Like
you uncomfortable almost to see that,
it
like,
made it made me quite uncomfortable to see like wow,
yeah,
a father being affectionate to his son,
wow,
even though
yeah,
like that's possibly the greatest love that the father ever had was towards his son. So do you
yeah.
know this sort of this kind of restricted emotional displays passing on from generation to generation,
Mm,
and then men go out, heterosexual men, and they go out and they meet women and they suddenly fall into a relationship with someone who's like emotionally fluent, and they're lost. They
mm-hmm.
don't, they don't, women ask them, what's going on? How do you feel? And the man can only respond hot or cold. You know what I mean? We're so limited in comparison, and that's what makes relationships so difficult for us too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and that's a good analogy in terms of the language. Like,
Yeah,
the woman is fluent because she's been continuing to learn since she was 6 or 7 years of age. She's been, advancing,
yeah,
whereas the man has, in a sense, been stunted in that way. And
yeah,
yeah, it can lead to so much dispute and misunderstanding and unfortunate, yeah, conflict.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What I might do is just have a little look at some of the polls that are coming in, and it'll help us, Connor, to really make the most of it for people here this evening. So people are saying, if you are a man, do you feel that showing vulnerability, sensitivity is a sign of weakness? And 25% say yes, and 75% say no. So wow, we've got a good woke crowd here. That's really, really lovely to hear. And again, I'm interested to know, you may know like that it isn't a sign of weakness, but is it something that you actually do? Do you know what I mean in terms of being able to express? Connor, I don't know, have you got a light in your room? Because you're turning into a kind of ghost, and I would hate to think that you're going to fade away on me. Is
You
there a
know,
light behind you anywhere? It's just very dark. Don't worry if there isn't. It's just it's kind of dark. Maybe it's just my screen. Hopefully it's not, but not to worry. If you are a man, do you get defensive if you're questioned about something you have done? So this is when somebody says, "Have you done that?" and it's an immediate, "Yes, I have." So 13% say yes, they do. 13 no, and 75% would say sometimes. If you are a man, are you quick to anger when under pressure? 19% say yes, 13% say no, and 69% say sometimes. Okay, well, I think that's true for all of us on some degree. If you are a man, and I was really interested in this question, did you feel threatened when growing up? It could either be physical, like as in not being big enough, strong enough, or social, like you were saying, that sense of like picking on that one thing that you stand out, not fitting in, worrying about what others might think of you. And here we get 88% of people of men saying yes, they did feel threatened in some way. So that's really significant. Again, if you are a man, do you feel that men should be strong and take all that life throws at you? 19% say yes, and 81% say no. Okay, good. So that is a few of them coming in. I'll come back to them again. In the chat function, just let me know, is there anything there that has occurred to you? If there's any comments you want to make, now is the time to make them. Because we want to, if there's anything coming up that you haven't, that you'd like to point out. I do want to actually start getting into some practical things, because I think it's, I'm trained in positive psychology, Conor. So it's always like, yes, we want to identify the problem, but it's always looking at turning it towards what are the solutions and what can we do.
Yeah.
So the women's polls are going out now. So if you're a woman and you're here, you're so welcome, and thank you for coming, and you can start to vote there, and I'll read those in a little while. So there you go. You're getting some bit of light, are you, Conor?
I'm actually this is how unprofessional I am with these things. I've just actually I'm in the darkest room in the house, but
Well, look,
it has the best Wi-Fi reception. So I've just put on the light from my phone.
like your style. No, look, I don't care. It's wonderful to have you either way. It really is. So if we move on, right, to just looking at like something that you said, and I think is really interesting to highlight or to discuss. What would you say is the link, Conor, between secretly sensitive male, right, the male who is sensitive in secret, and misogyny? So what is that?
Well, that I can imagine misogynists are sensitive too, in the sense that in order to have, and this is my sense of this, that in order to kind of feel that kind of animosity and anger towards women, that there's probably a certain kind of mother wound in a man. There's something that's connected to like his link with his mother or something like that.
Mm.
And I think that could also be connected to sensitivity.
Yeah, yeah. It's just something I'd never really linked before.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a comment come in there from Miriam, and again, interesting. She says, I think women can get uncomfortable if partners cry or get emotional because they are not used to it.
Yeah,
Um,
there's something really interesting about that, Fiona. Do you know what I mean? Because like men are raised in this system of patriarchal masculinity. We're raised to sort of act a certain way. It's kind of like a rule book for men. And we're trained that, okay, we're not emotional, we're able to fix things, we can always make a decision. Even if we don't really know, we'll make a decision. You know what I mean? This is all kind of part of men's conditioning. And women are also conditioned to recognize those things as that's a real man. So quite often there's a strange situation where women are always expressing a desire to have more emotional men, for their partners to be emotional, and then their partner starts to cry, and the woman is like, what do I do with this? I don't know how to handle this. Because we've all been raised in the same soup. We've all been raised in the same system.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's, in many ways, it's difficult for women to kind of allow the men to change too. There's work required on both sides.
Like I said, I haven't seen my father quite, so we haven't been brought up with that. We're not used to it. We're like, oh, so
Yeah.
this, even though like, yeah, we want it, we don't know. Yeah, so it's a good point, I think, isn't it, that Miriam made there. But would you say that is changing? Like, I mean, especially in the younger generations, because, like you said, going back, rewinding to you were 19 years of age, and even the term mental health was one that was just like you didn't quite understand what did it even mean, or anxiety, or any of these words. But where we are today, and the huge strides that we have made forward, we have to continue to look at that and be grateful for that. Do you think that is changing in terms of because of that work that more and more women are comfortable with men expressing emotion, and that's starting to hopefully keep things moving in the right direction.
Totally. And you know that I think there is a huge amount of change. And also I just want to acknowledge that kind of the vast majority of the emotional labor is being done by women.
Hmm.
Like even looking at yourself there, Fiona, that you would kind of put together a webinar like this on men's mental health, and I mean, some of the best texts on men's mental health, like Bell Hook's book, The Will to Change, it's probably one of the best books on men's mental health. So much of the work to create healthier men and encourage the growth of healthier men is actually been done by women. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I know there are men out there as well, though, definitely. Let's not forget, like, I know you
totally.
you
Yeah.
did you weren't you part of the Dublin Social Boys Club, that
Dublin Boys
something.
Club. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was onto your good pal Al,
Mhm.
and I know it's something that and I think he's a wonderful person to an advocate really, because he's a real man's man, isn't he? And he's going to I think a lot of men are, not that you're not, Connor, but in terms of being able to actually reach people and have that that ability to connect, I think is really good.
Yeah.
Um, can we put up the book author, please? Who was it you said there, Connor, that
I can type it in, can I?
you can?
Bell Hooks, who died last year.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. Well, not that great that they died, but
Yeah.
great that you put it in there for people. Okay, so if we go back to, because I think it's always important, to examine again the roots. So if we look at, how would people here, the men that have turned up this evening, again, thank you so much for being here. And we have a special prize for all men that I'm going to announce at the end, so stay with us. But what would you say to them? What steps can they take to start to heal from traumatic events and or humiliations, let's say, in boyhood?
I think the biggest part is learning to trust other men again. And that's what the Dublin Boys Club is all about. That's what any sort of men's circle is about. It's about
Mm,
creating spaces where the primary objective is for men to trust each other, for men to come together where we can let our guards down,
mm,
and there is a conversational style which is in support of each other rather than trying to tear each other down. And that's the biggest component. When men can trust each other again,
mhm.
um,
Yeah.
we kind of
And how does that happen? Is it through discussion? Is it through showing vulnerability and seeing that it's safe to do so in it?
it's by example as well. Do you know what I mean? Like when we do stuff with the Dublin Boys Club, or when I run men's circles and things like this,
Mm,
it's just I kind of lead the way with vulnerability.
mm,
And when you do that, there's something very compelling and addictive about it. So I do a workshop every couple of months, and there's one on next week, and it's called the Mindful Dick.
I remember
And
you
it's
telling me about
basically,
this when we met. Yeah.
yeah, we
Wow.
gather a group of men together to talk about sexuality in a way that, like, some men talk about sex all the time, but we talk about it in a very crude, quantitative way. And what this is all about is, it's like, well, let's come together and have some real talk about our relationship with our bodies, our relationship with our dicks, how we actually feel about, like, sex, how we feel about these things, like how's our relationship with women, what does it do to our esteem, like what role do we feel we have to play. And by just simply being one of the first to be vulnerable, there's something very addictive about that, because it's our heart's desire is actually to really, like, shed so much of the secrets that we carry.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So it's sort of almost like it starts to open something up for people, that for men that was so closed, and that they see, for example, if you're being vulnerable, that that they too can enter into that space. And as you say, it's like I suppose it's reawakening something, Connor. Is that right? That is
Totally.
so deep down from so long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very important. And would you say that, like I said, that's one way to heal, right? And within the men, within a men's group, in a men's circle, as you say, does that then extend out into the relationships that men have with women and the other, relationships in their life?
Well, if you think about it, right? So if men um deep down men are craving emotional connection. If you can't satisfy that need with the men around you, then basically your partner, your female partner, is your only outlet for feelings.
Mm.
And this means that then, your partner is sort of your lover, but also your therapist and your fixer. And so you kind of, it sows the seeds for these very sort of emotionally codependent relationships where the man is simply coming to his partner with his problems over and over again, and not even coming with the problems, is just sort of showing the symptoms of the problem.
Yeah.
And it's the partner's job to then decipher, oh, what's going on, what does he mean by that cold shoulder, what's the mood all about now, like why isn't he kissing me, this sort of thing. And I think that's maddening for most women.
Yeah,
um
yeah. I think you're
so
right. I think it's the symptoms are the problem. It's like if someone comes to you, whatever the nature of the relationship is, and they sort of are open and able to share, then that's one thing. But it's the kind of the mixed signals for many people, for many women, is trying to decipher what's actually really going on here.
Yeah, and the mixed signals is just an emotional confusion. Do you know what I mean? It's if they don't really know, we don't really know what's going on with us a lot of the time because
Yeah.
we're not kind of, we don't have these conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this just leads us in lovely to the women's polls. So the first one is, if you are a woman, do you worry about the men in your life suppressing emotion? So it's exactly what we're talking about. It's 93% say yes, they do worry about the men in their life. And that is, that's tough, because it puts extra pressure on everyone, on, if there's children involved, extra people and, parents, everyone is going to be somehow impacted by that.
Mm.
If you are a woman, are you surprised when you ask a man in your life a question and they become defensive? 57% say yes, they are surprised. It's that kind of thing. Oh God, I didn't, wasn't expecting that. It's kind of like, can be quite uh, a surprise. 43% say no. If you're a woman, do you feel apprehensive about anger arising with the men in your life? And 83% say yes.
Mm.
So again, that's really interesting and quite sad in many ways, isn't it? It's not a pleasant feeling to be worried about anyone, whether man or woman, that they're going to get angry, and to have that level of uncertainty is not good. So that's why, as you say, it's like in a scenario like that, it would be really helpful for that man, let's say, to have some kind of outlet outside of the relationship where he's able to express and come back in a more regulated state. Is that what you were saying?
There's something as well about when a man is surrounded by other men,
Mm,
um, and when they're conscious men, and by conscious I just mean men who are there to actually support each other's growth rather than
mm,
compete and attack each other. We kind of, there's an attunement that happens inside us where our nervous system begins to regulate because we just feel at ease and we relax. And in that space,
mm,
trauma gets processed. So I know myself, like once a week, I spend 2 hours in a circle with a group of 10 men, and I've been doing it for a couple of years, well, more
mm,
or less every week. And in that time, we discuss what's going on. We discuss the feelings that are present inside our bodies. And in
yeah,
that space, we just process things,
mm.
and you come away from it just feeling like your nervous system is regulated, you're balanced, you're at harmony. And then you can kind of, it makes it so much easier then to be in the presence of a woman. because
Okay.
you don't have this big emotional pull, this need to be kind of fixed or regulated by the woman because you've just attuned with the group of men.
Amazing, Connor. Yeah, wow. I almost, to almost go myself, but then I know. Yeah, but I think that's really well, it's very important to see that and how almost the roots, if you say, of this humiliation, let's say, a lot of it was done with boys and teenagers and young adults. So it's almost like going back to the very cause of it is where the healing happens,
Yeah,
within that men's circle. So that's why it's so important. Is that right, do you think, or is that part of it?
totally. And it's the kind of the it's feeling love from other men again. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like we all, as men, we all crave love, to be loved by other men. And it seems like kind of one of the only acceptable places to receive love, and for heterosexual men,
Mm.
is sort of in sports circumstances. You know, you kind of like, oh, I love you, you did so well, oh, I love you, you know, this kind of language. But
Yeah.
to just be able to like sit with a group of men and feel that they
Mm.
love and support you and want the best from you,
Mm.
um, is really, really helps to undo so much of the traumatic imprints that we experience as young boys.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Very,
Mhm.
very healing. Um, I've never really thought of it like that. So it's lovely to hear, Connor, and I'm really hoping that it's resonating with everybody here, men and women. So if yeah, I've answered that one. So or read that one. If you are a woman, have you worried about the men in your life being physically attacked or bullied by other men? So 47% say yes and 53% say no. Um, yeah, okay, interesting. I think that is a concern, though. I mean, again, being a mother, and having a teenager, that is something that you'd be worried about. Um, if you are a woman, would you welcome the opportunity for the men in your life to be softer and speak to you rather than man up? And we've got 100% there saying yes, they would, like that. So that kind of leads me on to like getting practical, Connor, and what it like, when you talk about vulnerability, uh, choosing vulnerability over control. That's something I've heard you say before, that we want to choose vulnerability over control. Why is, first of all, the first question is, why is that the way forward? And second of all, how does a man actually go about that? Like what does that look like? If someone here, this is all new to them, just imagine that this is like, again, you and I have this fluency, this language, you work in this, I work in this, so it's very familiar to us. But what about somebody here who's just going, like, I really, this is all really new to me.
Mm.
How do I move from here to somewhere like way over there?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think a really good way to do it is to reframe your relationship with fear, and to begin to kind of look on fear as a veil, and on the other side of that veil is huge expansion. So vulnerability really is about um, recognizing in any sort of a dialogue, in any sort of a situation, that a moment could arise where you will notice this fear about communicating a certain thing. And for
Mm,
most men, at that moment, the suppression occurs. That's the control. We place a lid on whatever it is that's coming up that maybe wants to be expressed. And I
mm,
think when we can get used to actually just risking it and saying it, and practicing to say the scariest thing that's
mm,
kind of bubbling up beneath like all the layers of programming, and getting used to saying that. And then hopefully you're saying it in a safe place with someone who will hold space for that vulnerability
mm.
and recognize that they receive it.
Well, it
And
requires awareness, O'Connor, doesn't it? Like that's quite, that takes a lot of mindfulness to be able to even know that that's what's going on for you, So what's even the step before that, if you like, for someone who isn't even aware that they're suppressing, for example?
Well, I think just recognizing that there's fear there is like
Okay.
fear is a pretty. You don't have to be that
Yeah.
mindful to know fear. You're kind of you
Yeah.
the panic sets in, and then recognizing, hold on, maybe fear is actually
Mm.
pointing towards an opportunity
Okay.
rather than going into the reactive mode, which is there's fear, I better shut down, which is how we've been trained, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's a certain amount of that. I think though at another level, it's just like really getting to know what's going on. Like most men have been conditioned to within an inch of their lives. You know what I mean? Most of us are
Mm-hmm.
not authentic. I'm not authentic. There's so much programming in me. So many of the things I do, I'm not doing them because I necessarily want to do them. I'm doing them because I've been trained to do this from the youngest age.
Mm-hmm.
So just recognizing first off that your expression is probably not authentic. So start to consider what might be an authentic expression. Start to read up on this.
Mm-hmm.
Start to kind of like question like why do I dress this way? Why do I cut my hair this way? Why am I interested in these sports and this sort of entertainment and so on? Because so much of it is all connected to this early conditioning that we get at a very young age when things are imposed upon us.
Mm-hmm. And
And
to
I think
fit
that
in, to belong in some way. Um,
totally.
yeah, yeah. Do you have an example of that? Like when you say that you're doing things that and again, you have that heightened awareness, let's say, due to the nature of your work, etc. But what would be an example in your own life that would, maybe help men here this evening?
Okay, well, I know a big one for me is that like up until I just moved to Mallorca like a couple of years ago, and in Mallorca they have this thing called ecstatic dance, right? And it's something that people on Sundays or Saturdays people will sort of organize these parties outdoors, and they'll set up a sound system. There'll be no alcohol, there'll be no drugs, and people will just dance in a very vibrant way, in a very free way.
Mm,
And I remember the first time going along to one of those things and going, I don't do this. I don't do this. And exploring it, like thinking into it, I was like, oh yeah. And the reason I don't do it is because I grew up as a man and there was ways that we could dance, but it had to be very controlled and sort of rigid. You didn't dance in any sort of flamboyant way because that might put you in danger. So recognizing and not saying like I float around the place like a bag of ribbons now or anything, but sort of recognizing sort of the reason that I'm not allowing myself to express myself is because of the fear that was placed in me at the age of like 8 or 9.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't want this restriction anymore. I would like freedom in my masculinity. Um, I think
Which
it's a
is
very
why you see so often, like it is like when you're describing that to me, that sounds like heaven. This idea of dancing, no alcohol, no drugs, just like being
yeah.
free. Like that to me is, I'm up there in 1 second. You don't have to, you don't have to ask me twice. But I know that for a lot of men that isn't, and women too. But there is that sense of just feeling so self-conscious. That a lot of people, in particular men, would not want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a kind of sign, isn't it, of how free we are, in ourselves. Michael says, and I think he's kind of going to what I was saying earlier. I think he's kind of trying to hone in on it as well. And it's a good question: is how do we recognize or identify suppressed emotions in order to tackle them? What would you say there, Connor?
It's a really, really good question, actually.
It
Uh,
is.
yeah, I think first off, you can just assume that there is a huge amount of probably suppressed sadness. Uh, as a man, there will be a huge amount of suppressed sadness.
Okay.
And there will also be a huge amount of suppressed joy. You know what I mean? They work at the spectrum is there, and it's sort of it's a suppression of kind of these, I guess, bigger emotions. Um,
That's the
and
first thing is like is so you don't, it's like almost like a blanket. You can just take that, it's going to be there just by the nature of it. Is that, wow,
totally,
okay.
totally, totally, because it's the only way that I mean, we're raised to suppress.
Yeah.
unless you've grown up in some, like, I don't know, utopian tribe who live in a forest, and it's kind of, you can
Yeah.
jump when you hear a bird singing in the trees, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
You probably will have had to suppress a huge amount. And I think the way to like come back to that is
Mm-hmm.
by really, really harnessing your creativity, by
Mm-hmm.
like allowing yourself to be musical, allow yourself to kind of be artistic, and spend more time in beauty. Do these kind of like get engaged in sort of more softer things. Men are always kind of encouraged to do these sort of these
Mm-hmm.
tough, harder things, but like really
Mm-hmm.
give yourself um time to be sort of more connected to soft things,
Mm.
still things, and things that kind of
Billy Elliot just came to my mind. It's a great movie. Have you ever seen it? It's about a boy who loves ballet. It's
yeah,
it's a classic film, and it's
yeah,
exactly that. And he's in a rough kind of
yeah, yeah,
it's Sheffield or
exactly.
somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah,
But absolutely. So the first step there just is assume that there's sadness.
yeah,
So for Michael's question, just recognize that it's going to be there.
yeah,
Um, and then start to find ways where you put yourself in an environment, let's say, that is softer.
yeah,
And yeah. And as well, all the men here, I definitely would recommend the Dublin Boys Club as a way, because I know Al does a lot of different activities and hikes and walks. So that's something that again you can practically do. Do you know what I mean? And start to put yourself in the environment where these kind of conversations are happening. Would you say, Conor, that's like on a practical level?
yeah, exactly. And in the Dublin Boys Club as well, we do once a month we have a kind of a sharing circle that we do where men can just come along, and it's an online thing, and
Brilliant.
we create a kind of a safe container, a safe space, and men can just share what's happening to them. Um,
Fantastic. So it's
and then
online,
also
so it's anywhere in Ireland people can access it or anywhere in the world really, because it's the same.
totally,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay.
And then I regularly do workshops for men.
Yes, you do, Conor. Of course, there's you there with it. You do stellar work, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's taking that step forward, isn't it? It's like you're going to feel the
yeah,
fear, but it's doing it anyway, isn't it? And
yeah.
would you suggest men go for one-to-one therapy? If they do feel this is something like, do you think that? I
I
mean,
think
personally,
even
I
if you
would.
don't feel something, you should be in therapy.
I think
Probably.
so. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, on a personal level, I've seen so much transformation with men that I've worked with, who are
Yeah.
very, very blocked when I first meet them. And it's just a joy. It's almost like watching them bloom or flower, as you say, that
Yeah.
transition of opening up and just being able to actually connect to emotions in a really safe place. So
Mm.
again, that's something that I would say is really helpful. Um, there's a question here again. I'll just answer this and then we'll kind of start to finish up. But um, Andrea, who's a lovely lady, says, any suggestions for communicating with men in our lives who have difficulty talking about their relationships? So again, what can women do, or other men who want to sort of connect or communicate with, like, what would you say, Conor, is a good way to, is it better to be less direct or more direct, or how do we navigate that?
Mm. Yeah. Um,
Like, if the defensiveness can come up if you say, "Will you just what's the most effective way?" I suppose is what Andrea is asking there, to
yeah.
encourage.
I think this kind of, I think by simply kind of becoming that in your own way, Andrea, like kind of by you becoming as emotionally fluent as possible,
Mhm.
um, and then without the kind of, yeah, it's it's a tricky one, because it's kind of, there is often such a huge desire from women for men to change.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
and
and I think that is actually quite toxic in itself. I think that the
yeah,
acceptance, is really helpful, and patience, I would say, just generally in any relationship, where there are two good qualities to take.
yeah, and
And
then also to
understanding.
yeah, and then to just recognize you're maybe there's something very attractive about being in the fixer role. And
Yeah,
that's probably not so helpful. Um,
absolutely.
and I think bringing the focus back to yourself is very useful, but also
Yeah.
um, just recognizing that for a lot of men, uh, emotional fluency just simply isn't there yet, and is slowly developing and taking time. But
Yeah, I think that's really very valid, that patience. And I think that this
mm,
evening will help women to, because it's opened my eyes. Like I said, I already thought my eyes were quite open, but we always have more to learn. And I
mm.
definitely am just the way you describe it, Connor, it's so visceral almost, in terms of what it is like, when you say you can assume that sadness is there or that there's a low level chronic depression that has become normalized, you
Yeah,
know.
and just to say, Fiona, that kind of
Yeah.
it doesn't take so much. Like it, I'm always blown away by how like some of the workshops that I do, where the guys at the end will kind of talk about their experience, and then they'll just say, I feel like I just took the lid off a 50-year jar there, or they'll
Wow.
just kind of go like, I can't believe I managed to share these things in a group of strangers, and now uh, like I'm never going to put this back in the box again.
Yeah.
It really doesn't take that much. Like it's kind of it just this one moment of trust can really like have this huge reset on a whole lifetime of protection and control.
Wow. Yeah, that's very powerful. So healing, as in it's like, because it's been so long in, it's almost that release is quite profound, I imagine.
Well, it's
Um
it's the power of vulnerability, right? It
yes,
really is
yeah.
the
And
healing
in a
power of
group.
vulnerability. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lovely comment here I have to read for you, Connor, that I think will really encourage men to come to your workshops who maybe haven't. I had a male friend who recently travelled from one part of Ireland to one of Connor's workshops in Dublin. He said it was a profound day full of connection, healing, openness. Such important work, and well done, Connor. So that's a lovely comment, and something I'm sure is really true. So I'm going to wrap up, and I want to just thank you, Connor, so much for being here. Especially, I know you come out of silent retreat, so it's probably quite like, oh my God, full on the World Wide Web, and having to navigate this. So I'm grateful to
With
you for
no
that.
lights.
Yeah. You need to show your vulnerability, come out of the dark. So I just want to say to everyone, thank you for being here. The playback is available until Friday if you've already registered. I want to thank everyone who came and donated. That was really, really much appreciated. You can still do so if you haven't already, and Kieran will put a link into the chat to do so. And just to let you know, the next Building Emotional Resilience webinar is on May 22nd, so it's a month from now, and I'll announce the guest in the next week or so. So thank you so much, everyone. It's been really, really important, and I think this is just the beginning. I'm going to keep talking about this as long as I can, as long as I'm alive. I'll continue to talk about this, because we need as many conversations like this as possible. Please do follow Conor if you don't already on his Instagram, and your website, Conor. You share your workshops there. Maybe Kieran, you could type that in if you have it there. If you have anything coming up, Conor, that you want to let people know about, please do. If there's anything coming that could be
On
useful.
Monday next, I'm doing myself and Christian Suhr, who's a German men's coach. We're doing a mindful dick is the name of the workshop that we do, and it's just about vulnerability, sex, and brotherhood.
Okay, and that's online, is it, Conor? So people
That's
can access.
online. It's a 2-hour workshop on Monday evening, and you can find out about it if you go to my website, Meditating with Conor, or just my Instagram, Conor Creighton. You'll find
Okay.
out about it there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, look, Conor, we'll let you get back to your Zen silence and your lovely Mallorca and everything. And thanks so much. It's lovely to see you. And I meant
You
to say
too,
at the
Fiona.
beginning, I loved meeting you back in, I think it was October we met
Yeah,
in
wasn't it?
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, about
Yeah.
your great book, The Truth About Love. So that's another, if you haven't read that book, I really recommend it. So thank you, everyone, and lots of love. And I will see you. The other thing, sorry, I have one thing to say that I really important is all men here. here as well, you know, we're talking about practical solutions, are being offered a free therapy on the couch pass, which is my weekly, I do a weekly online session that I absolutely love. We do have some men, I'm delighted to say, but we need and would love more to come. So every single man who has come here this evening is going to be given a free pass, and hopefully that's something that will really, you'll start to come to more and more. So we will be in contact with you about that. So again, bye bye, lots of love, and thank you so much. Bye, Conor. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Orla. Love
Bye
you.
bye. Chat to you
Off.
soon.
Bye. Bye.